Assalamu alaikum, guys. So, under the pretense of hard disk maintenance, we have already learned fragmentation. To just give you a quick cap, fragmentation happens when a file gets scattered all over the disk. Same file is no longer in contiguous tracks. Instead, it goes all over the place. And the reason is that when we constantly, delete files, programs, or keep adding data to the files and things like that, so it really shrinks, increases, and sometimes there's not enough space next door. So part of the file has to go someplace else on the disk, right? That's called fragmentation. Fragmentation is bad because it makes the disk running all the time. The load time increases, and your computer becomes slow. But that's not our subject. Today, we are learning about the sort of physical damage that happens to the hard disk. Okay, to the hard disk. So there's a few things that happens. I mean, the hard disk, there can be mechanical failures, right? The motor is burned, or some head broke or something like that. We're not talking about those. You know, we're talking about the errors, like for example, you wanted to read a file, and your operating system says that for example, read error, or it says that cannot load the file, or it says file corrupted, something like that. So so what happens is that the the the, the hard disk drive, okay, over the time, when you use it for a long time, so because of the wear and tear, right, the regular use, you are, imagine that you keep writing and raising and writing and raising, and the more files coming, and all those. So the these things are like some metal platters. So they become like, it's like, for example, a battery, you charge, discharge, and then at some point, it doesn't really, you can't charge the battery. So same thing when you make a surface, like magnetize and then erase it, and then make it magnetize again, and then erase it, and then make it a magnet again, right? Because this is how you save data, right? Creating these magnetic spots on it. So it loses its ability to be a magnet, right? So what happens is that because the disk has all these, you know, sectors and tracks and blocks, so so disk develops bad sectors or bad blocks, or maybe the whole track is bad or something like that. So what happens, that if you had a file which was, like for example, you had a file A on this sector and this sector, on these three sectors or four sectors. Now this sector went bad. Now, even though you have the other three portion of the file, but you can't read it, right? Because a chunk of it is missing. So the operating system will give you error. Okay, so now, what are the reasons that why the uh, the disk in the hard disk or the platters develop these things, bad sectors? So the first one is the extreme hot conditions, or extreme cold conditions, or sudden moves while read or write is happening. you drop the laptop or the disk, or there was a sudden jerk. So the head that is on writing on the disk can really touch the surface and cause some problems. And the fourth one is normal aging, or you call it wear tear, right? Over the time, like things gets old, right? So one, two, three, and four. Remember these things. So what happens due to these things? Your hard disk drive develops bad sectors or blocks. Now, how do we repair those? That's the question. How do we repair the bad sectors and the bad tracks and stuff like that, right? How do we repair them? Can they be repaired? So the answer is that the bad spots or sectors on the hard disk drive cannot be repaired. So remember that they cannot be repaired. So if they cannot be repaired, then how to deal with the situation? So how do we deal with it? Is that there's a couple of utility programs that comes with it, operating system. One is called, for example, disk check. It's a small program. You can run that. And what it does is that it really goes to the platter and it try to write on every sector and every block. It writes something on it like 10101 and then try to read it back. If it cannot read it back, then it knows that this is a bad block. So what it does, then it comes back and on the fat, or maybe another error table, it mentions, he says that, okay, well, block number 7 on such and such disk is bad. So the next time when the computer is about to write something, it will skip that track. It will not write anything over here. So see that disk check cannot repair the block. Instead, it flagged it. It marked that bad area, right? It's just same thing, right? You walking on the road, there was like some black ice. You avoid that. You know that you're gonna go on the black ice. You're gonna slip. You go across, right? So the one program is called disk check. There's another way that we can also use the second way. So this was the first one. And what is the second method? Second method is formatting. Okay. Format. You format the disk. But when you format the disk, you know what the formatting does, right? Formatting install a file system on the disk. And what is file system? File system is when you make tracks and blocks and things like that on the disk, right? Install the file system. At the same time, the format utility of the program also flags bad sectors and spots on the disk and creates a table and write down all those bad track table, right? Or something like that. Put all those bad spots over there. So, and then thirdly, what it does is that it erases all data on the disk when you format. So 1, 2, and 3. Remember these things for the questions. When you issue a format, when you tell the computer, hey, format the disk, it does these 3 things. It installs a file system like FAT32 or EXFAT or NTFS TFS or something like that. It really creates these blocks and sectors file system. Secondly, it flags the bad spots on the disk, telling the operating system, hey, these are bad spots, do not write on those. And thirdly, it erases all data on it. So if your disk is getting old and developing bad spots, maybe this is the only option you have. Again, if you already have data, remember this for the question. If you already have data or files on the disk, you don't want to format because it's going to erase all the data. So you want to run a disk check. Disk check will really move the data from the bad spots and flag the bad spots. It takes a long time though. But if disk has really gone really bad, then you have no option to just really reformat the disk and bring your data back from the tape backup. Okay, that's why it is important that you have either have two disks or you should have a disk, hard disk. In every computer, you should have HDD, and then you should also have a tape backup, a tape drive for backup. So every night you back up all the data, whatever changes made over here, you put it to the tape, so that if disk goes bad or develops any bad spots, you can always bring the data back from the tape backup. So that's enough for today, inshallah.